So, hi everybody, I am Sophie Smith at York Public Library, and I am really pleased to welcome you all to one of our Camden Conference programs this year. I'm going to do just a very quick little Zoom etiquette update, and then I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Hester, who will give us a proper introduction. I'm sure everyone by now is very familiar with Zoom and how it all works.
He told me he's always short of breath.
But there is different buttons along the bottom edge of your Zoom window that would allow you to mute or unmute, to add to the chat, or to turn on closed captioning, whatever you might need for your own Zoom comfort. We will be watching the chat for questions along the way, so you can certainly use that. But there will also be natural breaks during the talk where you can unmute and ask your questions too. If you need anything, you're welcome to message me in the chat during the presentation and I'll try to help out. But I'm going to turn it over to Andrea right now to give an introduction to the Camden Conference and to this program tonight.
Thanks very much, Sophie. As she said, my name is Andrea Hester, and on behalf of the Camden Conference, I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's program. I'm especially pleased this evening because instead of thanking one library, as we usually do, I'm able to thank 5 libraries for their participation. In addition to York Public Library, we have Scarborough Public Library, the Kennebunk Free Library, Patton Free Library in Bath, and my own personal library, Prince Memorial in Cumberland. On February 17th through the 19th, we will present our 36th conference, Global Trade and Politics, Managing Turbulence. Tickets and lots more in-depth information are available on our website, camdenconference.org. Pretty simple to remember, just camdenconference.org. There you will find a terrific roster of presenters, including our keynote speaker this year, Peter Goodman, who is the global economics correspondent for the New York Times, among many other fascinating and knowledgeable people. The mission of the Camden Conference is to foster informed discourse on world issues. In keeping with this mission, we offer a series of free community events leading up to our annual weekend conference. These events are intended to provide background and to touch on areas related to the conference that may not be covered in its 3-day format. I hope that many of you will attend the conference live at the Opera House in Camden or online, and also at 3 in-person streaming sites in Belfast, Rockland, and Portland, where we all get together in the same room or auditorium, hang out together and get to watch it on the big screen. That's always fun. Again, you can find all the information about this at our website, camdenconference.org. Tonight's very interesting topic is positioning the Roux Institute to expand K12 STEM education in Maine. We are very fortunate to be joined by 2 representatives of the Institute, Ula Polsky and Lindsay Jamieson. Ula Polsky is Director of Corporate Partnerships at the Roux Institute. She spent the earlier part of her career in the foreign policy field, working to advance U.S. economic interests with the State Department and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. And later she served as Government Affairs Director for Duke Energy International. Upon returning to Maine, she focused her efforts on local economic development, helping Maine-based businesses attract and retain top talent through the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. Lindsay Jamieson is a teaching professor at the Corey College of Computer Sciences at Northeastern University. Her area of research focuses on algorithms and theory. She's also a member of the executive committee for the ACMW North America, which supports, celebrates, and advocates internationally for the full engagement of women in all aspects of the computing field. Professor Jamieson earned her doctorate in computer science from Clemson University and her bachelor's in computer sciences from DePaul University. Prior to joining Northeastern in 2021, she was an associate professor of computer science at St. Mary's College at Maryland. And now, without further ado, I will hand the proceedings over to Ula Polsky.
Thanks, Andrea. Really appreciate that very warm introduction and great information about the Camden Conference. I haven't actually ever been, and I'm excited for this year's topic. So as Andrea said, I'm Ula Polsky. I've been with the Roux Institute since almost its inception. So we were born January of 2020, which is a pretty challenging time to start a brand new global research university campus. I'm going to attempt to screen share. Hang on one second. Let's see. How do we do? Thumbs up? Fantastic. So what we thought we would do, Lindsay and I, we already heard some introductions from Andrea. I wanted just to share a bit about who the Roux Institute is, kind of generally speaking, where we are now and a bit about where we're going. And then the bulk of the presentation will be Lindsay sharing details on where we are now as a state in terms of K12 computer science education and a bit about what the Roux Institute is doing to really advance initiatives in the state. So we, as I mentioned, we were born 3 years ago. This was the brainchild of Dave and Barb Roux. Dave is a Lewiston native, and he and his wife, Barb, were really compelled to answer the question of why not Maine? Why can't Maine be as competitive as other major metro areas that are leading the way in technology? Boston, Bay Area, there's a lot of growth in Austin, New York. And really, Dave knew that Maine needed three things: dynamic talent, interesting new companies popping up, and
I just go on mute.
And an ecosystem to nurture and continue developing talent. So really, we are here for the state of Maine and are growing all the time. One of the things that really struck me when I first joined Northeastern is just how expansive the university is. This is not Northeastern that I knew when I was growing up and going to high school in Bangor, Maine. The reach is really extensive. 14 campuses, 2 of which are in Canada, and there's one in London. Over 90,000 applicants for fall 2023 admission for the undergraduate program. It's just phenomenal growth and a really interesting place to be. Northeastern is all about experiential. This is all about learning in the flow of work, making sure that what we're doing has relevance to our communities, to industry, to the nonprofits that we work with, to the economy here in the state. In the case of the Roux Institute, each campus has a unique focus, and ours, I'm very proud to be affiliated with the Roux campus here in Portland. I have a passion for economic development, and it's been really, really great. So a little bit about kind of where we are now. We're focused in really 4 key areas, with Dave's objective and mission at its core. We're really focused on building talent, developing talent, new talent to join our graduate and certificate programs where Lindsay teaches and other of her colleagues, and also upskilling talent that are working in industry, working in area nonprofits. We do a lot of collaboration with other institutes of higher ed, and really trying to build that whole ecosystem. There's a significant research endeavor at the Roux. We're focused in the key areas of computational medicine, advanced manufacturing, life sciences, experiential AI. We just had a big conference last Friday on the state of AI in Maine. Really, really interesting day-long event with a beautiful report looking at AI and its impact in all different industries in the state. And it was just a really great day. And then also human data interaction, so data visualization. In those research areas, they work collaboratively with other parts of the institute and other parts of the university. again, all aligned in a very applicable way rather. And it's all done in partnership with all sorts of organizations. Most of my work is with our larger corporate partners, but we partner, as I mentioned, with other institutes of higher ed. We partner with area nonprofits. We're partnering in all different ways. Some organizations have a few co-ops who are working for them. Others have significant research that's underway, and others may have a few employees that are enrolled in our degree and certificate programs, and they're supporting them that way. So there's lots and lots going on. I will pause to ask if there are any questions right now before I turn it over to Lindsay. And happy to answer other questions at the end, but I wanted to make sure I left the bulk of the time for Lindsay to share details about K-12 education. So any questions about the Roux itself before I turn it over to Lindsay? Okay, Lindsay, you are up.
All right, thank you. All right, hi folks. So as Andrea said when she was introducing me, my dissertation work is in algorithms and theory, and I'm here talking to you about K-12 CS education. And one of the reasons for that is that once I started in my first job after getting my PhD, I realized that it doesn't matter how much I do in algorithms and theoretical computer science if I don't have anyone to teach. And so I've focused on education in the at the collegiate level. How do I make that work? How do I increase diversity? How do I get more people interested in computer science? And as I was doing that, I started looking at, well, where are they coming from? And one of the things that I figured out is that there's a problem in terms of K-12 education, and it's not just a Maine problem, but a nationwide problem in K-12 education, where computer science is seen as an extra or an on-the-side thing that some schools can do because they have money. And part of it is that a lot of folks, including a lot of teachers, haven't taken computer science, so they don't know what it is, and it's really hard to teach something that you don't know yourself. So I thought I'd start today by explaining a little bit about what I see as computer science and what computer science education is, so that we're all starting from the same point. This is something that you don't have to do in fields like biology, because you start learning biology things from kindergarten up, where computer science isn't labeled in K-12 education in that way. So computer science education can break down into 4 real parts. There's computational thinking, which I'm going to go into on the next slide in a few minutes. And that's something that you may not have heard of that before. And part of the reason for that is that computer science educators are still debating and arm wrestling over what that is exactly. I'm going to give you my definition and some parts of that. But then once you've got this computational thinking thing, you have to focus on problem solving. That's at the core of all computer science. And that's actually a skill that most students need to develop, is problem solving. And it doesn't have to specifically relate to computer science, but when they have those problem solving skills, as they develop those, they become better computer scientists. Then what you also have to include, once you've got computational thinking and problem solving, is actual computer programming experiences. Notice that that is not first. And if I'd asked you at the beginning, what is computer science? You would have said, oh, well, it's programming. It's sort of programming. It's partially programming, but saying that computer science is programming is saying that is similar to saying biology is doing dissections, when there's a lot of biology that doesn't involve dissections at all. Yes, you'll probably have done dissections to get to wherever you are, but it's not like the core thing that you have to know, but it's the thing that everybody recognizes. Computer programming is that for us, where everybody thinks that computer science is all about the programming, and you need to know how to program to be a computer scientist, but it's not the one and only thing that people do as a computer scientist. And there are ways to introduce computer programming experiences that are appropriate to the grade level. And the great thing is that from what I've seen in Maine, we've started doing this. So it don't come out of this thinking, oh, we're so behind. Think of it as we are taking the first few steps in this particular race, and it's already started, and we're just trying to get it going a little faster. And computer science education in the K-12 space can culminate in an AP/CS course or exam. I say an or there because you don't have to take the exam if you take the course. And there are 2 AP computer science courses that are available that can be taught in the United States as a whole. All right, Ula, can you move me on? Thank you. All right, so computational thinking. There are 4 tenets to computational thinking from my perspective. And the fun thing about these is that these are things that can be taught to kindergartners. This is not something that is magically you're able to think of it in college or high school, that suddenly your brain is built differently and you can understand this. These are things that kindergartners are doing, but their teachers may not have the same vocabulary, so they aren't necessarily using these words. And so when the students see this concept again in computer science, it seems new and different and scary because it's a big word. So abstraction, this is looking at something and identifying the important qualities about it so that you can generalize from those important qualities to a more general version of it. The example I like to use for this is a chair. When I say think of a chair, you're probably thinking a specific chair. But if I'd ask you to tell me what all chairs have, you'd probably say legs and a seat, maybe a back. When I do this with my students, this particular exercise, we get into a really long debate about whether or not all chairs have backs. Is a stool a chair? These are really important questions, and they help identify what is the important quality about a chair. You're like, Lindsay, we aren't doing computers yet, but having the skill to be able to abstract something is an important skill when you're in computer science. So even though it's not a computer skill, it's the thought processes that are necessary to be thinking like a computer scientist. Another part of this is pattern recognition. This is looking at the world around you, or looking at a set of data or some information and identifying the patterns that are in it. And then once you've identified these patterns, you try to figure out, can I abstract this? So you're using this other tenet within pattern recognition to be able to say, here's the generalization I can make for all of these patterns. And kids do this from a really young age. They're like, all right, so if I eat all of my vegetables, then I can have dessert. So the pattern here is veggies equals dessert. Those sorts of patterns are things that kids recognize from a very young age. Decomposition is the next section here, and that's taking a really big problem and breaking it down into smaller parts. This is something that I am positive that you all do. Usually the big problem here is I need to have the house clean for something to happen. And that's a big problem. Well, maybe it's not, maybe you have a better system than me, but for me, it's a big problem. So I have to break it down into smaller parts. And I can recognize the patterns there, like vacuum room X. And now I've done pattern recognition. Vacuuming is a pattern, and the abstraction is room X, where I don't say, we are vacuuming the living room today. I say vacuuming living room. I can say vacuuming bedroom. All of those things allow me to break the bigger problem of cleaning the house into smaller parts that I can then apply the other 2 tenets to. And once you've done all of these steps, you can take your problem and create an algorithm for solving it. And this is the part where people are like, yes, that's a word I recognize. That sounds like a really interesting word. I can definitely get behind this. Algorithm is the one that I know. The problem here is that algorithm is a word that is identified as special and scary because it's new. But if you've ever cooked using a recipe, you have used an algorithm. Because an algorithm is just an ordered set of steps that you use to solve a problem. And as long as you, for instance, put together your box mix following the directions on the back of the box, you're following the algorithm to get cookies. Now it doesn't use a computer, but you can, if you make up an algorithm, you can use it on a computer in order to get your computer to do things for you. We aren't to the point where you can, you know, put the box mix in a computer and then it can give you cookies at the end, but I'm sure it's coming. So next slide, please. Now that you have a better understanding of what I mean by computer science education, I thought I'd give you some data on what the computer science education landscape is like in Maine. There's a national website called code.org where they organize information about computer science education, K12 specifically, throughout the US, trying to keep track of it. They are, their goal is to get computer science education in the K12 space uniformly across the nation. And so they collect all the data so that they can give information out to folks like you who would like to know it. So I collected this information on January 18th as I was putting these slides together. There are 3,500-ish open computing jobs with an average salary of $81,000 in Maine right now.
Wow.
It's a pretty big number. That's a lot of people that could be here in Maine working for the Maine economy, using things in Maine, buying things from other people in Maine, and the salary is not bad. In 2019, so this data is a little old, 34 high schools in Maine offered an AP computer science course. I told you there are two options. I don't think they differentiated in my data, but 34 high schools in Maine did offer it. In 2020, 298 AP exams were taken, AP CS exams were taken in Maine. That was the lowest number of any STEM subject that had an AP course. So we have an opportunity here. The other detail that they keep track of, and this is a DEI diversity data point that they like to keep track of, is how many of those were taken by female students. They also keep track of racial and ethnic variations. Given Maine's overall racial and ethnic variation, I didn't include that data, but only 30% of the exams were taken by female students. So that means that there's an opportunity there for us as well. Next slide, please. So what are we doing? We started out, but because coming in and saying, we know the best way doesn't actually answer any questions or get people excited. We started asking questions to find out what people wanted in Maine, what sort of things are missing. And this started by working with CSTA in Maine to find out what the teachers that are currently teaching computer science need to help themselves out. What do they need to get better? And the answer that we found was that they really needed additional professional development. We focus on integration with existing expertise. So we think that teachers know what they're doing, but they need a little bit of extra information. This is like continuing ed stuff for teachers. And we've had a lot of fun with that. We are going to be starting in the fall a graduate certificate in inclusive computer science K12 education. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And I'm really excited about that particular one because it specifically includes a course that the CSTA folks were saying they couldn't find in Northern New England. And they were having to go to online universities in order to find it. We've been working with MMSA, Educate Maine, and other partners to co-develop and present materials to teachers, which is a great thing to help us out and so that we're not duplicating efforts. The other things that we're working on is to connect with other Northeastern University locations to scale existing outreach programs, meaning that I'm not going to be reinventing the wheel. I'm taking some information that we have of what worked in other places and changing it to work in Maine. And we're working on finding engagement points for youth so that they can come to the Roux and find out what we're doing and find the really cool stuff that we're doing and see how that helps them understand what computer science is, because a lot of them are coming into computer science with an idea of what computer science is based on television, movies, things like that, where those aren't, biographies. They're not nonfiction. And so that means that what they come in with doesn't necessarily give a good indication of what they should really expect to have the computer science field be. Next slide, please. All right, so the graduate certificate in inclusive K-12 CS education will begin this fall. It's going to be a 4-course sequence where you take one course per semester for 4 semesters, going fall, spring, 1 course over the summer, and then the next fall. It's designed to take into account that our primary focus is for current K-12 teachers. And I mean K-12. I would love to have a kindergarten teacher in my first cohort of people because I feel like that's a great place to start, and that the kids aren't scared of computer science at that point. They see it as something that anyone can do, and I want to foster that. The fun thing about our particular certificate is that the first 2 courses are going to be with the other Corey students. One of the programs we have available at the Roux is called the Align program, and that is specifically aimed at folks who did an undergraduate degree in something and then went out into the world and tried to use it, or they started using it and decided that wasn't for them, or they wanted to add something to it with computer science. And they come in and we start from, all right, so you know how to turn your computer on, and get them through to getting a master's degree in computer science or data science within 3 years. And so the first 2 courses of that will be part of the certificate as well. So they will get to see how other people are applying computer science to things that they've learned previously. Additionally, one of the course that I'm really excited about is a methods course that's going to be that 4th course that they take. And this is going to be about, how do I teach computer science? I'm in my classroom now. I have all this computer science knowledge. How do I get it from my brain into the kids? How do they learn this? How do I turn this into something that is exciting and interesting to them? And so that's going to be a really fun course. All right, next slide, please. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to make sure that you heard about was the professional development. When I'm developing the professional development workshops, there are a few things that I keep in mind as I'm doing that, and it's going into the graduate certificate as well. I'm assuming that teachers are experts in their field. They know what they're doing. They know how to run a classroom in general. I don't have to teach them that. They know that. I also assume that they are busy people. They are grown-ups with full-time jobs, possibly a family. And so anything that they do with me needs to be aware of that particular caveat. And I also understand and recognize that computer science probably wasn't part of anything they took during their training. Most universities still don't have computer science as a core requirement for their general education. And so if you think back to when you were an undergrad, you probably didn't take a computer science course. And most of the teachers didn't either. And until we get to a point where that's a natural thing that everyone takes, I have to assume that they are starting from, I can use the technology in my classroom, but I have no idea how it works. So our goals when we do these professional developments is to supplement existing knowledge and vocabulary. As I said, there are things that kindergarten teachers do with their students that is computer science, but if they don't have the computer science vocabulary, they're not going to use it. And then the kindergartners don't associate that particular activity with computer science topics. So when they get to computer science in 6th grade, when they're doing STEM things, it's a new word and it seems scary because it's new. The other thing that we're trying to do is work with existing resources already in the schools. There have been some great things that the Department of Education and other folks in Maine have been able to give to the schools or get for the schools. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We would like to have these computer science tools pulled out of the closet, dusted off, and be actually used for their purpose in a way that the teachers can utilize more easily. To go with that, computer science is a really young field. If you think about it, compared to the one that usually it gets matched up with is math. Math has been around for a while. So, calculus hasn't changed in a while. But computer science has only really existed since the 1940s, which means that things are changing a lot. And this means that when teachers are learning how to deal with this new thing that's in their classroom, we also have to support them with, all right, this year, this is the new tool that is super awesome and great for your students. But in 2 years, it's going to be something else that's completely different. How do you take the things that you're developing for this current technology and make it future-proof to be able to work with the technology that comes in next without you having to start over from scratch? And those are the things that we try to do as we're doing these professional development workshops. Next slide, please. And that was it. Okay, I thought so. So I saw a couple of questions in the chat. So the first question is, how do we reach out to high schools with STEM programs to build on what they've already learned? That is something that we are working on. I would like to take the word high school out and just put in schools, take out the word high. We've been reaching out to schools. We've been working with librarians, tend to be the ones that get to do this fun stuff. And again, it's about making sure that the vocabulary of computer science becomes part of their everyday language, so that when they're talking about things in class, they talk about, all right, instead of saying, what's the process for doing this? What's the algorithm for doing this? And you talk about the various parts of computational thinking from kindergarten day one, just like you do biology. So to what do I attribute the low number of CSAP exams? This is a hard question because I need you to understand that it's great that there are so many. The problem is that it's hard for teachers to be able to, it's hard for schools to be able to support the classes. It's hard for teachers to be able to offer the classes and know what they're teaching. There aren't as many, sorry, back up. The way that teachers are certified in the state of Maine, the teacher certification for computer science is more locally concentrated, which is fine, as long as the local school system knows what computer science is and understands how that should be properly licensed. And so my guess is that the low number of CSAP exams has to do with where the exams are being offered, or where the classes are being offered and how many students are in each. That number doesn't keep in mind how many people total there are that were taking AP exams that year either. So I can't tell you like this percentage of students took this particular AP exam. What is the importance of learning computer science in schools? So let me go with, I'm a professor, so I like to ask questions. How many of you are using a computer right now? Oh yeah, that's everybody, because we're on Zoom. How many of you can understand why your computer does what it does? No. Okay. How many of you have the small computer that lives in your pocket? Can you troubleshoot that? No, not really. If we teach more computer science in the schools, hopefully in future generations, the technology will be less scary because you'll have a better idea of, instead of thinking of it as sort of this black miracle box that does stuff, you'll understand how and why it does things so that you can get better information back out of it. That's why it's important, because the computers aren't going away. We're just getting more of them all over the place. How can we get more women interested in STEM, specifically computer science? So I got this question as well recently from some people at Northeastern on the Boston campus who were talking about DEI work. And they pointed out specifically Harvey Mudd College, which is in California, they've done amazing strides in gender diversity and computer science on their campus. It's a small college, but they had 50 to 60% female students. And that happened after they hired their a new president of that particular college, who happens to be a female computer scientist. It is really hard to be what you can't see. And this goes for women and racial and ethnic minorities. If you don't see people like you in a particular field, it's really hard to imagine yourself doing it. All right, Ula, the next question is all you. It was Andrea's second.
Okay. How does the Roux Institute hope to make a positive impact on Maine's economy? What does it add? Great question, Andrea. I think it's in so many different ways. It's really raising the bar, I think, first and foremost, of what's possible. I mentioned this event that we had on Friday. We had 500 people on campus. We had CEOs, CIOs, we had leaders in privacy, data privacy, such a crucial topic. We had foremost experts on machine learning and artificial intelligence to really demonstrate that AI is being utilized all over the place. Just as computer science is critical, this particular component is also critical. And it's in our fisheries, in our forests. We see it in all over healthcare, in the insurance industry, in financial services. And so really, I think just to make visible how forward-leaning we really can be as a state. And so many people are already doing really amazing things. They just need a push. And I think the Roux has been serving, and Lindsay, correct me if you think differently, I think it's really been serving as a convening space to bring all these voices together. I mean, the collaboration is, higher ed doesn't necessarily always collaborate well with one another. And we were talking a little bit about how libraries may or may not collaborate, and how this is a really unique forum to bring libraries together. Higher ed is no different. So to be able to be a voice for the community to really move the economy forward, if so many open jobs are in computing, right? So how do we help upskill employees, bring in all of these young people? Like, we have to start in this K12 space. We got to like rewind the tape if they're going to actually be able to help the economy globally. So I guess that's what I would say. Lindsay, I don't know if you had anything else you want to add.
No, I looked at that one and said that one's an Ula question. All right. How can computer science be integrated into classes traditionally outside of the STEM world? So this is one of my favorite things to do. I'm going to assume that all of you at some point have read either The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. Either way, in both of those books, it's easier to make that guess when I'm talking to people through a library conference. Either way, in both of those books, the folks in that book are going on a journey. They have a path that they're going to follow. They have a problem they're going to solve. And you can easily, in a high school classroom or wherever you're reading The Hobbit, make a map of, I'll pull out the map of Tolkien's work and plan the path that these characters are going to take through the book. And you can map that whole thing out, and then you've given them the algorithm for solving this particular problem of getting the ring to the I'm going to mess it up because I haven't read it most recently. But that sort of thing is an easy way to talk about algorithms in a space that is not at all computer science. And you can actually use some of the tools that the kids have in their schools. My second grader was using something called a bee bot. It's a robot that's about this big and looks like a bumblebee, and you can move it forward and you can turn it, and you give it this whole path and it could go do that. And in an English classroom, you probably wouldn't necessarily use the bee with 6th graders or 8th graders, but you could have them print it out on a big mat and have them give the instructions to the bee and see, does it work? Did I get them to the right place? Or did they get stuck in the spider's cave? Those sorts of things. That's really easy to do in English. History, same sort of thing. What were the steps involved in a particular war? What were the battles that were fought? How were things dealt with? You can easily go through and come up with the algorithm that people were following then. Yeah, so I think you get my idea here. And I mean, if you think about it, the recipe, that's not a STEM course, but if you follow a recipe, you've been doing an algorithm. And unless you're talking like baking, because that's chemistry and it's just hiding. So that's a little different. How many of the STEM related jobs available in Maine have an international connection? That sounds like an Ula question more than me. I would go with a lot, but I think she might have more information.
Yes, a lot. I don't know that I could specifically say how many. The organizations that are working in Maine are highly distributed. Many of them are, certainly the large ones, their workforce is physically located all over the place, including internationally. And I think for most organizations, to stay competitive, they need to at least have an eye towards a global footprint. We've had a few of our startups, 2 Chilean companies who chose to start their business in the state of Maine. They wanted a foothold in the United States. And the Roux presented an opportunity for them through our Techstars Accelerator program to come to the Roux and be mentored and learn from expert faculty and really develop their ideas in the United States. One organization was very successful in Chile and was taking that idea and really wanted to grow it internationally, but from Chile internationally instead of from the US, looking outward. And so it really just demonstrated the interconnectivity of all of this particular area and of technology writ large. So I can't say that I have a specific number in mind, but the organizations that we're working with know that in order to grow, they can't just grow within the state. They need to look beyond the state of Maine and beyond the United States. Lindsay, I have a question for you,
Okay,
if I might.
sure.
So we have a number of Maine learners at the Roux Institute, and we have other learners that are not from Maine,
Correct.
some from outside of Maine, and many international learners. Can you speak to any differences or similarities that you're seeing within the learner population for those that are coming from either a Maine background or US versus international, just in terms of the student population? I don't know that you're able to generalize at all, but if there's some common themes that you've seen, I'd be curious to hear those.
Sure. So I can tell you, I teach the introductory programming course. So, you know, how I was like, oh, programming is not really a big part. Programming is a part, and I teach it, meaning that I'm usually teaching them in their first semester. So I'm getting students. What I can tell you, the biggest difference of international versus US citizen or domestic students is age. A lot of our domestic students tend to be older. They finish their undergraduate degree, they went out and they did some things, maybe started a family, and then they decided probably in the pandemic that they wanted to pivot, they wanted to change, and computer science sounded like a great way. And this program that we offer, the Align program, was a great way for them to add something that they hadn't had before. Where our international students tend, it's not 100%, but tend to be directly out of undergrad. They did an undergraduate degree, a lot of them in finance. I don't know why, but they did this international degree. They did this undergraduate degree, and maybe they did a co-op or some sort of internship and realized that that was not what they wanted to be when they grew up, and started looking around to see what else they could find. And the Align program spoke to them about that as well. I can give you another one that goes sort of with your international connections and jobs. I have one of my students this semester who works for one of our partners. And so it's a Maine-based company, but that particular student lives in Oklahoma and is taking my course, and is in our Align program and is working through the Roux Institute to get a master's degree and upskill themselves. So it happens a lot, and whether they're in Maine now or they will be later. We've had students move to Maine. After one semester, they spent one semester making sure that it was something they wanted to do, and then at the end of that semester, they moved to Maine and are integrating into life in Maine now. Oh, I wanted to answer Roger's question. Can we integrate STEM with place-based problem-solving projects? Yes. The better question is, should we? And also the answer there is yes. What we've found through education research is that students are more likely to complete and really think of new and interesting ways of solving problems if they are something that speaks to their heart, something that's local to them, that they really find a lot of interest in. So things like shoreline cleanup and other environmental tasks are really interesting to students, and they want to solve those things. And if you give them the tools, they will find ways to solve it that are completely different. And this is normal things that parents know. If you give them tools and a problem, they will solve it, and it may have nothing to do with how you thought they were going to solve it. So that is a really awesome thing for us as educators to see. So totally possible, likely, we'll see. Anyone else have questions for me? Or Ula? It can be her turn to talk to.
Well, I'll ask a quick question. I know that obviously part of this is educating kids young when they're in school, and that was the purpose of this talk, but I'd also be curious how much you think educating like the general public about what this means, so that parents are familiar with this language when their kids come home talking about it, or grandparents or whomever. Like, where maybe could a library fit into some of this piece where we're not going to be able to teach it in as instructive a way, but are there like opportunities to do like one-off sort of computational thinking kind of programs that might allow for this? Do you have any way of seeing how that can integrate into a more of a public library environment?
I would love to. I would be happy to. In fact, if you would like me to connect you with our partnerships person who's in charge of working with nonprofits, I would be happy to do that, or Ula can.
Yeah, for sure. Sophie, I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
So I work with our corporate partners, and I have a colleague who works really closely with Lindsay and manages our relationships with our community partners. And so she's a rock star in this area, and I'll connect you directly with her, and I think you guys can develop a really interesting program. And again, like we are happy to be virtual. We're happy to be in person, whatever suits you. But she's got a lot of energy, and right?
Yes.
She's got a lot of energy.
I think that if we tell her about this, she will think it's awesome, and we'll be talking about when we can possibly do it for you. So
Right.
It's not, oh yeah, that sounds great, and 5 years down the road we do it. It's, when does it fit in my schedule so that we can get this done? What efforts is Roux making to integrate broad exposure to STEM fields into the global challenges of deglobalization and geopolitics with Maine companies? Yeah, that's a you.
Yeah. You know, I will say the short answer is that I think it presents an interesting area of opportunity. You know, we have collaborated with the state, we've collaborated closely with MITSI. And so, you know, we're taking the lead, you know, in this area. I would say we're taking more of MITSI's lead in terms of helping to articulate that. It's not a primary area of focus. Certainly geopolitically, it's not a primary area of focus for us. So I think the entire institute is very international. Our research staff, you know, I continue to be blown away by the number of colleagues who are engaging in extremely sophisticated research in second and third languages. And, you know, so almost by default, this community of educators and this community of research are highly integrated and are breaking down barriers of geopolitics just by the very nature of, like, that's how collaboration happens. And so there really isn't a sense of barriers that seem to get in the way with regard to, you know, with regard to national origin, for example. I feel like the passion for the work is what really defines that collaboration. But it's an interesting question and something I think we should think about a little bit more. I'll look at the next one. We're looking forward to having your campus on the Portland waterfront. Is it at all possible for you to estimate when we might see that ambitious development take shape? That's a great question. So that is in part up to the city council, the city of Portland. There is a zoning change that is required in order for the development to move forward. So it's, you know, we're certainly feeling cautiously optimistic that it will happen, but it is somewhat in the city's hands. So you know, we are, if the city approves of the zoning change, we're hoping 2026. That's sort of the projections. But again, I don't know if any of you have had to work with your local municipalities on any sort of zoning, anything for any properties that you've tried to build or expand. It can be challenging. So we are doing our best. So if you are on the Portland waterfront, the Sun Life building is right next to ours. And Sun Life is one of the partners that I work with. And they have not been able to move in. It's been months. And so they're working with the same city government that we are. So we are doing our best, and we're very hopeful. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. We'll know more soon. And yes, the Christmas tree is staying. If anybody wants to know, the Christmas tree is staying. I will also, when I find it, I will put it in the chat. There's a really great website that the developers, so this is Ideals, that's the nonprofit that's developing the site. This is Chuck Hewitt and Sam. I'm blanking on Sam's last name. They are developing the site, and it's really comprehensive. They're beautiful graphics. It's maybe 80% asphalt right now and 20% green. And the intention is to reverse that. right? Just, and really to make it a convening space. Right now, like, you haven't been able to walk down on that site in 100 years. The idea is it's, you know, to be open to the community and to really make it a space where everyone can go and to be able to just, like, the view of Portland from that site is, it's just not a view unless you're at the boatyard next door. It's just not something that we've seen because we haven't been able to access it. And I'm really, really excited about it, and very, very hopeful. So I will find the chat, the website rather, and put it in the chat, or send it to you guys afterwards, because you should check it out. It's really great.
Lindsay, Ula, could I make one follow-up question?
Yeah, of course.
Just quickly, I have a call with for Maine on the forestry, on sustainable forestry. I do brand development, and I was just wanted to prime myself and thought maybe you guys had some insights regarding the digitalization of natural resources. That was kind of where I was riffing from with the shoreline cleanup, thinking that that's wide open territory in terms of computation, to understand, you know, the health and or lack of health in various aspects of our world. And so anyway, I've got a call coming up, and I was wondering if there's something that you're doing, the Roux Institute, that might make me sound smart.
I will also put in the chat again once I find it. The link to the report that I mentioned from the State of AI in Maine. There's a case study on forestry, and it, I think it will speak to it'll speak to your question and really I think articulate a lot of the things that we're doing. So with New England Marine monitoring rather, and I'm blanking on the name of the other natural resources partner that we had and did the case study with, but I'll put that in the chat, and I'll put the link to the Ideals website. And I think that will be a really great reference for you to help kind of understand what's been happening computationally in that specific area, can help prepare you for that conversation.
That's beautiful. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see that we're getting close to our 7:30 time. I want to be respectful of our presenters for coming and giving us their evening hour today. Are there any final questions that anyone wants to ask before we move along? I'm happy to send along any resources that Ula or Lindsay want to pass off to the registrants of the program. So if they can't be located right now, don't feel rushed. I can take care of it later this week. But I'd be happy to help anyone else with their questions, either in the chat or unmute and ask away. I really want to just take this moment to thank Ula and Lindsay both very much for coming and offering this talk as part of the Camden Conference, and Andrea for introducing them and telling us more about the Camden Conference. It's a really fantastic thing that this state has and is able to offer, and I love that libraries throughout the state are able to help make it more accessible to everyone around us. And this was a really fascinating talk that I'm so pleased that York was able to host, with Scarborough and Kennebunk and Patton and Bath and Prince Memorial in Cumberland. So I hope that you will attend some of the other events. I think we've got maybe 2 more on our library cohort program list next week. If not, the Camden Conference is just in a couple weeks. And then hopefully we'll be doing a similar kind of thing next year with some other area libraries to pull more of these virtual programs together for everybody. So thank you all for showing up tonight. I have recorded this, so if you wanted to go back and reference anything in the future, it'll be on the York Public Library YouTube channel in the next week probably. But thank you all so much for attending, and thank you to all of our speakers for your fabulous information.
Thanks for having us. Nice meeting you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.